Hey everybody, welcome back to Fix the Rust Bucket, where we're continuing to work on our 2000 Chevy Silverado. Brought the truck back in the garage, got it up in the air, took a look at the suspension. Didn't really like what I was seeing. The truck is 23 years old at this point, and the bushings, ball joints, there's a lot of stuff that's old, doesn't look like it's been replaced. So I just decided we're going to go ahead and redo the whole front end. I want the truck to stick to the road, and I want the suspension to be reliable, so let me show you what I'm talking about with the older stuff here. All right, so here we are over on the right front corner. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. 23 years worth of not neglect, but just things that don't get replaced normally. Here's the bushings on the upper control arm. You can see the dry rot. Come over to the sway bar link, which was damaged in the accident, but it's not what I'm trying to show you right now. If you look at the bushings on that, all dry rotted out. It's old, rusted up, cruded up, filth over time. It's just surface rust and dirt. We're just going to go ahead and, like I said, we are going to be towing with this. We're doing poly bushings, heavy duty ball joints for the upper and lower control arms, poly bushings and links for the sway bar. I do have new, more heavy duty hubs coming, rotors and brake pads. The calipers themselves aren't too bad, so I think I'm going to keep them for now. The hoses weren't looking too bad either. It's just like, see this here? It's zip tied. That's your anti-lock brake cable to your hub. You don't want stuff zip tied holding it on. It's not strong enough. There's a few things here that will probably, if the surface rust is deeper than we want, we'll get new parts. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and take the entire suspension apart, drop the rack and pinion out as well. We're keeping the spring, upper and lower control arms on both sides, and the sway bar. Everything else is going to be replaced. So let's get started with taking this apart and getting those parts cleaned up. The first thing we got to do in order to get access to our sway bar bushings, and also in the back here, the bolts to our rack and pinions, we got to remove the two splash guards. There's one right here in the front, one underneath. They more or less just keep debris, pebbles, rocks, whatever, from kicking up inside your engine compartment area. Simple 5 bolts on the front splash guard and 4 bolts on the rear splash guard. Get them out of the way, and we can go ahead and start removing the sway bar and rack and pinion out. Here's the first one. Put that off to the side for now. All right, with that one out of the way, we can take a little bit look underneath the here. This is one of our wires, crossover wires, to the ABS on the passenger side, feeding back over to the driver's side. Again, truck's 23 years old. The wire loom is brittle and gone in most spots. I don't want those wires exposed, so we'll go ahead and get some new wire loom while we're at it. Put that back on, check the wires, make sure nothing's broken before we put everything back together. Get the second second splash guard off. With those removed, we'll go ahead and piece of the wheel stuck underneath of there from the accident. With those two shields removed off to the side, it exposes what we need to get to, which will be the two bolts mounting the rack and pinion and our sway bar and the sway bar bushings holding it to the frame. Okay, so we're over here on the driver's side, and we're going to go ahead and remove the sway bar end link right here, disconnecting from the driver's side. The other side's broken, so I'm not sure how we're going to, hopefully it just comes off, the bolt comes off, I'm not sure yet, but we'll see. So on the top here, there's a spot you can put your wrench on. Underneath will be a bolt attached to the link inside here. It'll be attached to the link bar. And we'll go ahead and just undo this. Bolts out, completely rusted up and stuck inside the socket. Get that out of the socket and we'll get something to knock this loose with. All right, so with the bolt off, the sway bar end link is actually, there's a metal bar inside. This is just a shaft on the outside. That metal bar is stuck down underneath here, so we're going to go ahead and take a extension and a hammer and try and knock it free because it's not moving at all. Get it loose, and then we'll go to the other side. It has loosened it up. Let's go ahead and get the other side off, and we'll drop the bushings, dropping the whole sway bar down. That's not going to work. It's bent too bad. Let's go back. We'll let's go ahead and drop the sway bar. I might end up having to cut these off. We'll see. All right, so with the tires removed and the front of the vehicle up in the air, all the pressure is taken off of the lower control arm pushing on the sway bar and across. Because of the bend on the right front, I'm not sure if there's any little bit of pressure left, but we're going to go ahead and remove the bolts from the bushings on both sides, drop this down, and then try and remove the end links because they're not wanting to come out the way they are right now. So you have one bolt back here and one up front. Same thing on this side. Metal bracket holding the bushing on. going to loosen them all up a little bit and see how the sway bar acts coming off. All right, so back over here onto the driver's side. Go ahead and try and get this out. Disconnect that one. All right, so we have the driver's side loose. Now we're going to work on the passenger side and try and get this one to break free from the sway bar itself. I can't get the bolt out of here, so we're going to at least try and get the sway bar off the top of it, and then we'll work on getting the link out itself. Sway bars off this side. Let's see what we can do to get this off the rest of the way. sleeve off. That off. Drop that down the bottom. So with the sway bar removed, we're going to move on to removing the rack and pinion out of here. This right here is the steering shaft. Comes out of the firewall down to your pinion housing right there. This bolt right here will separate the steering shaft from the pinion housing, and the pinion housing right here mounts to your rack housing, which is underneath. That bolt and these two power steering lines are pretty much anything you need to do up inside the engine compartment. Once we have those removed, we'll move over to the wheel wells. So in each wheel well, you'll have your outer tie rod link. This is your inner tie rod link. Your rack boot, which is on both sides. The outer tie rod attaches to the spindle or the knuckle on the back side, and there's a nut underneath here to knock that out. We'll remove that. Take the boots. We can take those off when we pull it out from underneath of there. That is super tight. I even sprayed some PB Blast on it to loosen it up a little bit. Starting to come loose. Should be loose enough. So now we'll go underneath and work on the two power steering lines. All right, so now that we have the bolt loose on the steering shaft coming into the pinion housing, we're going to remove the two power steering lines coming in to the housing as well. And then from that point, we can start working on the underneath and the sides. I didn't worry about cleaning off the crud because we're going to tear this down and rebuild it. So we'll clean it up, then we'll clean these fittings up, or these ends up, before we go and reinstall it back in the truck. I do have a drip pan underneath to catch what fluid is going to leak out of the power steering. First one removed, we'll get underneath of here and try and loosen up the second, get the second one off. All right, in order to get that one out, there's a clamp right here on the hose. I'm going to get that removed and then we'll pull that out. Not always easy, but a little bit of time and patience. And there we go. Second hose removed. All right, now that we've got that hose removed from there, we'll be able to take, now you can see this, the metal tube coming out. We'll be able to get that metal tube off of the housing. Probably don't need to pull it off to get the housing itself out from the truck, but I don't want to bend the tube. I don't want to run the risk of bending the tube. So we'll just go ahead and take it off now. Oh. Just so I don't have to buy another piece. We'll just take this off. See if it's loose enough. Hands down in here. Nope. Let's get a rag. Power steering fluid's pretty slick, so just can't get a grip on it. There we go. So our next step in removing this is going to be now disconnecting the tie rods from the knuckle or the spindle of the suspension. It's the same thing on both sides. Passenger side is going to be a little bit easier since this inner tie rod is snapped completely in half. You'll have a backing nut here. This right here, the backing nut forward, is the outer part of your tie rod. And then this one here is your inner tie rod threaded into there, which they use to align the vehicles. To just show how bad these are, I shouldn't be able to twist these with my hands. And you can just hear it tapping metal in there. It's blown out, beyond blown out. And there's not even any grease in there. So we're going to start with trying to back off the backing nut. Then we'll loosen up the castle nut underneath here and knock this free from the spindle. I am going to try and keep track. I'm going to separate the outer control arm from the inner control arm. I'm going to count the rotations of that spinning off. So when I go to put the new stuff on, I can get it back to close to being aligned. So when we're ready to send, when this truck's done and ready to go back on the road, we can send it out and get the alignment, and it's not so far off it tears up our tires. So. Wasn't too bad. It's loose enough that we can get it off by hand. I don't want to do that just yet because we are going to go ahead and take a hammer. I'm not too concerned about these. They're shot. We have new ones already here. But if you are doing this to do another job or project and you don't want to wreck these, you take a hammer and you're going to tap underneath here lightly to remove them. Excuse me. You'll tap lightly to pop them up and out of here. There's a tool that they make. You could stick in between these two and knock it out. These are so torn out, it wouldn't matter. But if these were still good, you don't want to tear these rubber boots with that tool. So it's easier just to hit it underneath. and knock it free from inside there. They're pressed, but not necessarily pressed inside. So there you go. A couple taps, a bunch of rust falling off, and that one's loose. So now you can remove the nut and pull that out. That frees it up from your spindle. Again, so now we're going to count, and I'll mark this. That's where it sat. The outer tie rod sat on the inner tie rod arm. We'll get the count and mark that down, so when we go back to put it back together, we'll do both sides. One full rotation every time to the bottom. That's one. So 19 turns, and that's what we'll mark down, and 19 turns when we go to put the new ones back together. Okay, so now we're on the passenger side. Again, the inner tie rod was broken during that accident the vehicle was involved in. It's the same thing. Locking nut there, castle nut there, and pop this out. But before I get into taking that out, I wanted to show you this here. This was the outer tie rod from the driver's side, and when I wiped off the filth from it, you can see the split in the boot. There's old dirt and grease built up in there, and it was garbage. So these are wear parts on the vehicles, and they do require being replaced once in a while. Not often, but once in a while. So with that, we're going to go ahead, and I don't need to worry about taking this off because it's already disconnected. We're just going to go ahead and remove the castle nut and get that off. All right. Get my hammer. Knock this one out. Take the nut off. And look at the boot right here, right there you go. Same thing on this boot. That's where that boot was positioned. That's the tightest spot that it'll ever be on the spindle when it's sitting. And same thing with that boot. That boot has a split in the same spot. It's ripped wide open. So not only were they old, but they weren't doing their job anymore because they weren't holding any grease in. Just collecting dirt, grinding away. Worse. So with the outer tie rods disconnected from the spindles, now we have the mounting bolts, one here and one here. We'll remove the nuts off the mounting bolts going to the frame rail. And then we can go ahead and finish removing the steering shaft and drop the housing, your rack housing right here. Drop it down, get it out. See, hopefully they're loose enough. All right, so the front bolt's now spinning. Go ahead and get a wrench on that. And then we can continue to remove them. I didn't get new nuts or bolts. We did get new bushings for this, and we're going to be replacing those. So we got to save the nuts and bolts and the washers. Same thing on the other side. Get the wrench on there. Ugh. Them out. Now we just got to work this off of the steering shaft. Alright, so it's removed from the steering shaft. Lift it up through here. Drop that down. Alright, so there we have it. Got the rack and pinion out. Have our new bushings, our seal kits, our outer tie rods are in, inner tie rods are in. In another video, I'm going to go over rebuilding this, and then we'll go ahead and do the reinstall back into the truck. Alright, thanks guys for watching. Don't forget on the way out, hit the subscribe button. Consider giving me a thumbs up if you like this stuff, and hit that notification bell.